At one point, James Franco was everywhere. He was the quirky sidekick in Spider-Man, the Oscar-nominated star of 127 Hours, the creative mind behind The Disaster Artist. He was Hollywood's golden boy. Actor, director, professor, even an artist. And standing by his side, almost like a brother, was Seth Rogen. Together, they were an unstoppable duo, delivering cult classics like Pineapple Express and This Is the End. But behind the charm, behind the endless ambition, something darker was brewing. Whispers of inappropriate behavior, a reputation for blurring boundaries with students at his acting school. And then, the floodgates opened. Allegations surfaced. Lawsuits followed. And suddenly, James Franco's empire began to crumble. As the scandals mounted, Hollywood turned its back. Projects vanished. Awards buzz disappeared. And most painfully of all, Seth Rogen, his closest friend and collaborator, cut ties. The man who once seemed untouchable lost everything. His career, his credibility, and even the brotherhood he had built over 2 decades. This is the story of how James Franco went from Hollywood's golden boy to one of its most disgraced outcasts. James Franco's ascent in Hollywood was swift and dazzling. His first real breakthrough came in 2001 when he took on the role of James Dean in a TNT biopic. The resemblance was uncanny, not just in appearance but in attitude, voice, and that tortured intensity that made Dean a legend. Franco's performance won him a Golden Globe and earned Emmy and SAG nominations. Practically overnight, he was no longer just another young actor hustling for roles. He was seen as Hollywood's next great talent, the kind of actor who could channel old-school charisma into a new generation. The following year, Franco moved from prestige TV to blockbuster fame with Spider-Man. As Harry Osborn, Peter Parker's conflicted best friend turned bitter enemy, he became a household name. Across 3 films, audiences saw him shift from charming sidekick to tragic villain, a role that gave him mainstream recognition. By the mid-2000s, Franco had successfully bridged 2 worlds, credible actor and commercial star. But his story wasn't just about big studio films. Franco's career was deeply intertwined with Seth Rogen. The two had first met on Freaks and Geeks, Judd Apatow's short-lived TV series that later became a cult classic. Their friendship blossomed into one of Hollywood's most iconic partnerships. In 2008, they reunited for Pineapple Express, a stoner comedy that became an unexpected box office sensation, grossing over $100 million worldwide. Franco's portrayal of Saul, the goofy but oddly wise dealer, earned him praise and cemented his status in comedy. With Rogen, he wasn't just a star. He was part of a duo audiences adored, a comedic powerhouse that seemed unstoppable. At the same time, Franco craved artistic validation. He sought roles that pushed boundaries, culminating in 127 Hours, 2010. Playing Aaron Ralston, a hiker trapped alone in a canyon, Franco carried nearly the entire film by himself. His performance was visceral, raw, and utterly compelling. The role earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor, proving he wasn't just a comic foil but a serious dramatic talent. It was the kind of performance that elevated him into Hollywood's elite. Yet Franco didn't stop at acting. He cultivated an image as a modern Renaissance man. He enrolled in graduate programs at Columbia, NYU, and Yale, studied filmmaking and literature, and wrote short stories and poetry. He directed indie films, staged art exhibitions, even tried rapping under the name Franologue. Profiles in magazines painted him as restless, brilliant, and endlessly curious. Franco leaned into the mystique, portraying himself as a polymath too big to fit in one box. But with that ambition came eccentricity. His method acting often made colleagues uncomfortable. On the set of The Disaster Artist, where he played Tommy Wiseau, Franco refused to break character, staying in Wiseau's bizarre persona on and off camera. Even Seth Rogen admitted it was unnerving. Years earlier, Tyrese Gibson accused Franco of repeatedly hitting him for real during fight scenes in Annapolis, evidence of how far Franco would go in the name of authenticity. By the early 2000s, James Franco appeared untouchable. He had prestige projects, box office clout, academic pursuits, and a powerful creative partnership with Seth Rogen. To the world, he embodied limitless ambition, the rare star who could thrive in both Hollywood and academia. But the same ambition that fueled his rise also blurred into arrogance, and the eccentricity that once seemed charming began to look like something darker. Behind the polished facade, the cracks were already beginning to form. The first big warning came in 2014 when he and Seth Rogen released The Interview. On paper, it was another absurd buddy comedy, this time a satire about assassinating North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. Instead, it spiraled into a global crisis. Hackers targeted Sony Pictures, theater chains canceled screenings, and North Korea threatened violence. Suddenly, Franco wasn't just making headlines for his work. He was at the center of an international scandal. While some praised the film as bold, others saw it as reckless. For Franco, the controversy tied his name to chaos, foreshadowing the storms ahead. But later that same year came something far more damaging. Lucy Claude, a 17-year-old Scottish student, met Franco after a Broadway performance of Mice and Men. She posted a photo with him on Instagram. Franco saw it and sent her a direct message. "You gotta tag me."
You gotta post it. You gotta tag me.
What followed shocked fans. He quickly asked if she was 18, who she was with, whether she had a boyfriend. She admitted she was 17 with her mom. Despite that, Franco pressed. Which hotel was she staying at? Should he book a room? To prove his identity, he even sent her a selfie holding her name on a piece of paper. The screenshots leaked, went viral, and news outlets had a field day. On live TV, Franco confessed the messages were real, calling it bad judgment, and blaming his inexperience with social media.
I'm embarrassed, and I guess I'm just a model of, how social media is tricky. It's a way people meet each other today. But what I've learned, I guess just because I'm new to it, it's like you don't know who's on the other end. You meet somebody in person, and you get a feel for them, but you don't know who you're talking to. And
right.
So I use bad judgment, and I learned my lesson.
But the damage was done. To many, he was no longer just eccentric. He was predatory. Franco's public behavior only fueled the perception. He posted strange, sexualized selfies, appeared erratic in interviews, and cultivated an aura of detachment that made audiences uneasy. Whispers grew louder about his acting schools, where students described blurred boundaries and uncomfortable dynamics. At the time, Hollywood shrugged it off. Franco was still winning awards, still making movies, still standing next to Seth Rogen. But the cracks were spreading. And when the hashtag #MeToo movement erupted just a few years later, everything Franco had carefully built would come crashing down. The breaking point came in 2017, ironically, at what should have been the peak of his career. His portrayal of Tommy Wiseau in The Disaster Artist was uncanny, a mix of absurdity and pathos that critics adored. The film earned him a Golden Globe for Best Actor, the kind of award that cements a star's legacy. But that night, Franco wore a black Time's Up pin, a gesture of solidarity with victims of abuse in Hollywood. Instead of applause, it became the spark that set his world on fire. Almost immediately, women came forward. Actress Ali Sheedy hinted on Twitter about troubling experiences with Franco. Sarah Tither Kaplan, a former student from his Studio 4 acting school, accused him of exploitation during nude scenes. Violet Paley alleged he pressured her into a sexual act in a car. On social media, the accusations mounted, with women calling out the hypocrisy of Franco wearing a Time's Up pin while privately abusing his power. Within days, the Los Angeles Times published a bombshell report. 5 women, most of them Franco's students, described a pattern of coercion and manipulation. At Studio 4, Franco had even introduced a sex scenes masterclass. Students recalled being pressured into increasingly explicit acts on camera, often under the pretense of realism. One woman said Franco removed protective guards during a simulated oral sex scene, leaving her exposed and powerless. Others spoke of broken promises, being told that performing nude or participating in orgy scenes would lead to roles in Franco's films, opportunities that never came. Franco denied the most serious accusations but admitted to bad judgment. On The Late Show with Stephen Colbert and Late Night with Seth Meyers, he danced around the claims, saying some were not accurate, but insisting he believed in the importance of victims being heard.
The things that I heard that were on Twitter are not accurate, but I completely support people coming out and being able to have a voice because they didn't have a voice for.
His words rang hollow. To critics, it looked less like accountability and more like calculated evasion. The backlash was swift. Scarlett Johansson publicly condemned him at the Women's March, demanding he return his Time's Up pin. Commentators who once celebrated him as a polymath genius now framed him as an abuser, hiding behind intellectual pretension. In Hollywood, his name became toxic. Projects were canceled, and awards buzz for the disaster artist evaporated. Then came the lawsuits. In 2019, two former students, Sarah Tither Kaplan and Tony Gall, filed a civil suit alleging Franco created a pipeline of exploitation through Studio 4. They claimed he lured young actresses with promises of career opportunities while subjecting them to sexually charged situations. Franco's lawyers dismissed the case as baseless, but in February 2021, he agreed to a $2.2 million settlement. Though he admitted no wrongdoing, the financial payout underscored how much damage had been done. The most painful blow, however, came not from strangers or the press, but from Franco's closest friend. For nearly 2 decades, Seth Rogen had been his partner in comedy, the man who stood beside him in film after film. At first, Rogen defended him, even saying in 2018 that he'd keep working with Franco. But as the accusations multiplied and the lawsuits dragged on, that loyalty faded. In May 2021, Rogen told the Sunday Times he would never work with Franco again, adding that he despised abuse and harassment and regretted joking about Franco's scandals in the past. For Franco, it was the ultimate betrayal. He later admitted the split hurt deeply, saying he still loved Rogen, but understood why his friend had to walk away.
What he said is true. We aren't working together right now, and we don't have any plans to work together. Of course, it was hurtful, in context, but I get it.
To outsiders, it confirmed what Hollywood already believed. Franco wasn't just canceled, he was abandoned. By then, the damage was irreversible. Studios no longer called. Directors didn't want his name attached to their projects. Casting agents quietly struck him off their lists. Franco had gone from Oscar contender and Golden Globe winner to a man blacklisted by an industry that once celebrated him. He had lost his career, his reputation, and even the brotherhood that defined his public identity. James Franco's fall was complete. After years of silence, James Franco finally broke his public exile in late 2021. In a rare interview, he admitted what many had long suspected. He acknowledged struggling with what he called a sex addiction, confessing that he had cheated on every partner he'd ever had and slept with students from his acting classes. That was wrong, he said bluntly.
Look, I'll admit, I did sleep with students. I didn't sleep with anybody in that particular class, but over the course of my teaching, I did sleep with students, and that was wrong.
For someone who had spent years dodging accountability, it was the closest he had ever come to taking responsibility. But the damage had already been done. Franco's reputation was shattered, and Hollywood showed no interest in welcoming him back. Studios had moved on. Younger stars filled the void he once occupied. For an actor once hailed as a golden boy, his absence barely registered in an industry that thrives on reinvention. Still, Franco has tried to rebuild. In 2022, reports surfaced that he had been cast as Fidel Castro in an independent film, Elena of Cuba. The decision was met with backlash, both from those who felt he didn't deserve a comeback and from Cuban actors who argued the role should go to someone else. The controversy only underscored his new reality. Every move he makes is now framed through the lens of scandal. And then there was Seth Rogen. When asked in a 2024 interview if he and Rogen were still in touch, Franco admitted the truth. "No, I haven't talked to Seth. I love Seth. We had 20 great years together, but I guess it's over." For fans who had once adored their friendship, it was a sobering confirmation that one of Hollywood's most iconic duos was finished for good. James Franco's legacy is complicated. On one hand, he was undeniably talented, a Golden Globe winner, an Oscar nominee, a performer capable of both comedy and drama, intellect and absurdity. On the other, he became a symbol of how quickly power and ambition can curdle into exploitation. He went from the next James Dean to a cautionary tale of Hollywood excess. Whether Franco ever stages a true comeback remains uncertain. What is clear is that the star who once had it all, fame, artistry, credibility, and the loyalty of Seth Rogen, lost everything. And in doing so, he became a reminder of how fragile success can be when trust is broken.